All right, Clay, come on up. This is Clay McKelvy. He speaks on finding a rewarding career that is a dream for all of us. Is that actually what you're going to talk about?
Pretty much, yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And his journey took him from being a janitor to making microchips and beyond. Learn how the United States stacks up against other countries when it comes to happiness in the workplace and discuss why. You're going to tell me about Denmark.
Maybe.
Okay.
Maybe. All right, let me try to get this thing loaded right quick. I've got a little presentation here. This is all being run on a Raspberry Pi. How many people are familiar with Raspberry Pi? Cool. And oops. See, I better start recovery here. So how many people are really, really happy with your jobs? Just let me see it right there. Wow. Okay. Okay, so given that, how many people feel like the reason that you're unhappy with your job is based on your rate of pay? Okay, there's a lot of people that are unhappy with their jobs, right? Because they think it's about the rate of pay, and it correlates. We'll discover more about that in a second. So everything about this was done on the Raspberry Pi, and the reason I mention that is because Raspberry Pi, as you know, a lot of you know, is a very inexpensive technology, and I hope to promote this in third world countries, maybe toward the end of my career or something, to try to get these things out. And I think it'd be a great project for Oasis, maybe even, to get involved in distributing some technologies to third world countries or impoverished areas like this that could enhance the classroom for a very, very small footprint on the dollar. So what variables have the strongest impact on a perceived level of happiness in the workplace is part of the conversation. And I didn't want to spend too much time talking about myself, so I'm going to get through a lot of this before I say anything too much about where I come from and what I did. So obviously work environment is very important, and income equality, but also about income distribution, but income equality also plays in how you feel about how you're being compensated in the group you belong in, where you're employed. There's two sides to this. You got income inequality in the country, and you got income inequality in the workplace. So then wealth status overall is about the money that you've saved and your possessions, and then kind of combining personal sense of accomplishment and meaningful work. So these are the four major variables to workplace happiness. And the reason that I selected, by the way, the rice terraces in China was because there's a distinct difference in personalities, both in the environment and in the individual. So we look at a collectivism in China. It's a perfectly collective environment where they're farming this rice. So they help each other with every single task. It's a beautiful thing to see this happen, and they gather up their produce and bring it in. So what is the difference between collectivism and what we experience mostly in the United States as individualism plays a role in happiness in the workplace? It actually does. So we're going to take a look at this. And so you see that the collective group is happiest when the collective group is successful. It's not about the individual. That if the yield was good, then the people are happy with their work. They're happy with what happened that year. And so we move on to the individualistic cultures, where we see that this environment creates a place where people are happiest when they're rewarded for their creativity, risk-taking, and superior performance. You could say quality of work or whatever, recognition for the quality of work. And so what we see now in this entire big picture, and I like to look at things from a 30,000-foot view. Let me apologize, I'm not an expert in the field. I'll try to answer a question, but this is how I approached this, was to come in at 30,000 feet and get down pretty close to us, but I'm not going to tell you how to find your dream job. So we can see that these individualistic and collectivist values show up not only in the country, but in the state and in the city and in the workplace, and even at specific tasks where you might be at different things that are collective and individualistic. My job is that way. So this is how the U.S. stacks up around the world, and I think it's an interesting thing, because if you look at these countries, let me see if this thing's even working. Yes, Canada, we have Norway, Sweden, all this up here, and parts of Europe. The dark green is the happiest people in the world. Okay? And except for over here, look at this. Is that not interesting? Way over there. And you see here, what's that?
Those are gray with no data.
No data.
Yeah.
Okay, so what is interesting here is that these societies, right here, all of them have a very individualistic social construct, but they have a social support. They have strong social support. It's a socialistic government aspect. Okay, so they have universal health care, things like that. And you see a similarity here in America. We consider ourselves the richest nation in the world, and we're not much happier, or we're on par with Chile, Argentina, and South America. But why would America not be stacking up as the best that we might think if we believe that wealth is important? And we'll find out in a minute we're not really the wealthiest nation in the world. So this is what's interesting, I think, on the curve, that when you look at collective societies, look how happy they are when things are bad. There's your GDP per capita. So they remain happy even when things are not going well. They're pretty happy, and yet they don't seem to reach this nirvana we think we're going to achieve as individuals. So you see this individualistic curve being very, very negative when GDP is low. That's because you got to stand on your own, and it's very difficult when you don't have any help. Okay, and so when things fall apart in an individualistic society, everybody gets hurt really bad. And keep in mind, this is also about how we report our happiness. Happiness is kind of a vague thing, right? You can't get an easy metric on it, but it's about what people say about how they feel. And individualistic societies tend to be, there's more data on this. So here's an interesting graph. This is average income in each country and self-reported happiness or job satisfaction and life happiness. And I think there's some interesting points. Look at Costa Rica and Guatemala up there. Not real high income per capita there. Pretty happy people by comparison to places like the USA. And then you see a couple of interesting things here about the wealthiest nations in the world: Denmark, Switzerland, Norway, Finland, all this. Very, very happy people there. And they have quite a bit of reason to be. They're making a lot of money, and they get a lot of help with whatever they need. Now, what's interesting is how poorly Japan fares. They're in here somewhere. Anybody see Japan? Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's Japan. Very high per capita income, not real happy. And I would go to the side that they're just extremely constrained, socially constrained people, and they're not reporting that they're very happy at all because of the pressures they have to succeed as individuals. They have a tremendous amount of pressure to succeed. And when success is considered a monetary aspect in their society. So here's an interesting graph. This is how much people trust each other. And what you see here is income inequality creates an environment of distrust among peers and groups within a society. And I see this as an important diagram where we are right now. These are recent graphs, by the way. I wanted to interject that the information you're seeing here, all this is recent. A lot of it came from a place called Our World in Data. And so you can find graphs on just about anything on Our World in Data. And so this is big, recent data been collected. So here's USA, way over here, with high income inequality, very distrusting of one another. And where are we today in our politics? And that, to me, is reflective directly to two aspects: the individualistic society.
Can you tell me what the outlier is all the way over to my,
Okay, this is income inequality. When income inequality is at its highest, people become.
Data point is what country?
What countries?
that furthest one out, yeah.
Oh, the first one out is Singapore. Singapore. Yeah, and that doesn't make any sense, doesn't it? So here we have, again, in that spectrum of very, very wealthy countries, they're not hurting each other so much over there. They seem pretty happy. So I guess it is a funny question about who are these people that are making so much money? How many people are familiar with the story about the super chickens? No?
No.
I'll try to paraphrase because Marilyn keeps correcting me on the details. But let's just say we got a chicken breeder, and then he's got some chickens that are outperforming all the other chickens, and this includes the roosters and the hens. So he figures he's going to take all those chickens that are outperforming, and he's going to breed them all like that. He's going to get all their genetic code kind of pulled up in this one group. Guess what? They kind of didn't do well. The average chicken seems to be pretty well done. So the super chickens were, the pecking order became so violent that they were kind of killing each other off and not producing a lot of eggs. And so what I see in societies that are very aggressive on this study is we're not real happy. And we're not as productive when we're not happy. So what's the key to this? So transparency in the workplace. How many people have heard about this? You've talked about this too. When it comes to transparency in the workplace, our incomes are important to us. They're vital to our feeling of security. And so a lot of new HR departments are coming out with policies that are much more transparent and are having very positive effects. So I didn't spend much time on this, but I thought it was an interesting thing that I'm telling you what, 20 years ago, this would have been no way, we're not doing that. Sorry. And now it's becoming so important to keep people happier in the workplace, probably because there's not as much money to go around when it comes to spreading it through the workplace. So there's a lot of data-driven takeaways that are really positive about transparency in the workplace, and this is just a short list. That means to go into any detail on this, but they're showing a lot of positive effects of transparency in the workplace. And I know I would really appreciate it, or would appreciate it. But as a middle-aged white dude, I do pretty well because I'm a middle-aged white dude, and that's just the way it is. So I'm not saying that that's right. I'm saying that is one of the things that keeps, I think, a lot of things from changing is the fact that some of us get by very easy. So where is the trend? And as you saw in these graphs, I'll go back in if I have to, but we do see money plays this huge role in perceived happiness, especially in individualistic societies. In the US, this is a funny graph. I think the most important things are this number right here, where at about $75,000 a year income, there's no more stress in life, really. You're doing fine. And the returns are diminishing from that point forward. So the guy who's making $150,000 a year isn't really a whole lot happier than the guy that's making $75,000 a year when it comes to income. And of course, there's very, very important factors about meaningful work we're fixing to get to, but money is key. Money is key, but it doesn't take a whole lot to make somebody happy, and we'll see that graph in a second. So you can see that people are stress-free, really starting about $45,000, $50,000 a year. The stress level goes way down, right about 45, 50 grand. Making that much money, then things are better. How many people here are making over $299,000 a year? A few. Okay. Not very many. And how many people are making under $75,000 a year? Okay. Almost everyone makes less than that, and so that's just the way it is in America and most places in the world. So we would all benefit from having that $75,000 a year job. So this is interesting stuff. This is the number I was talking about right here, where you have this person making 75 grand, 93% satisfaction in this area. People are reporting happiness in this area, 93% of them. Not much more than guys who are making 300 grand as surgeons. So this is also about the meaningful work. So this graph is pulled from Forbes, and it's about the most meaningful jobs that pay well. Okay, and I found a trend in that shows our altruistic or collective side. The most meaningful careers are reported to be medicine, education, and clergy. People find a great deal of meaning in these works. So the income for clergy is around $46,000 a year, and they are about 95 to 94% reporting that their life satisfaction is high and their pay is fine. Okay, that's in the clergy. Education, a little bit more money, same thing, same degree of happiness. So you can say that these three jobs are equally meaningful in these fields, relatively. And then over here, no surprises, the parking attendant is not happy. Machine operators, very unhappy. Anybody ever operate a machine for work? Okay, it's not fun. Fashion design, interesting. They just say that their jobs aren't meaningful. I don't know that they're going to throw their job away when it's making them 150 grand. But the fashion designers are not feeling like their work is very meaningful. Doesn't mean a lot to them. And that's the end of the presentation. So I don't have a lot of feedback. My career starts like this. I don't know how you were raised, but I was raised in a very poor family. And I think I would probably still be really, really poor if I didn't have just fair gifts that enable success. So I went into the military, didn't go to college. And then I went on from there to come out. And I was also promised the chance of education in the Air Force, but I didn't get a GI Bill. But I did get the Hazelwood Act from Texas, which I ended up using in my 30s, 40s, and 50s for more education. So I started out working in a flower shop as a delivery driver. That was my first job, my first long-standing job in Austin, Texas. And I stayed in the floral industry until I reached a level of manager. And I was running a business. I was running an entire wholesale floral business. And then I left that to go into technologies. And I went to work for Software Semiconductor. And then I went to work for Dell. And I was in graphics there. So it was a long process for me to get into the income bracket where I started getting a little bit less stress. I guess probably in my mid-30s, I started feeling like, okay, I'm going to be able to pay the bills. I'm going to go put food on the table every month. And then recently, I was laid off from Dell in 2009, and I went back to school again and finished up a degree in general sciences and went on to Texas State. And my plan was to go into environmental science. The reason I'm talking about what I did is to show you how this worked out. I was going to school, studying organic chemistry to build a curriculum for environmental sciences. I wanted to have a positive effect on the environment. This is key. This is what was driving my education, is going to have a positive effect on our environment, because I'm a believer in climate change. And so, and I wanted to have a positive effect on this. So I was in classroom one day, and a lot of young, brilliant people, like these two in the back, studying chemistry. And they've got this. These young people have got this. I'm going to be in my mid-60s before I get a master's degree. And am I ever even going to have a program? And is that important to me? I have all this investment to make in an education that may never pay off, and I may never feel that I've had an impact on the environment. It may never feel like I've been deployed to do what I want to do. What can I do? And solar industry, the PV systems, is what spoke out to me. I thought, I could do this. I think I can do this. And so, long story short, on that very day where this epiphany occurred, standing in the classroom in the chemistry lab, I decided I had to leave and go to work. And I went to work. The first thing I did, I got a call from a friend, and it just happened to work out where friends of mine wanted me to install some off-grid solar at their cabin. And so I had already applied for a few places and had one good job interview at Freedom Solar. Went and built that solar machine, and it's still working today just fine, just the way I put it together. I'm happy with it. They're happy with it. And not long after that, I got my job at Freedom Solar. And so what I have is a job that has a collectivist sum. I feel like I'm connected to this collectivist effort to make a difference in our environment. And then I have this individualistic flair where I get to improve processes and do cool work, and I get rewarded for my creativity and for the quality of my work. So there's two aspects to my job. And I don't think there's any test I could have taken that would have said, hey, you know what, you need to be a PV systems designer. That would have never arrived at that, but I could feel it, and I hope that everyone has the opportunity, or has had at least one opportunity, to get a clear vision about what it is you want to do. And just go do that. Because it won't make any difference, in my opinion, it won't make any difference in your happiness if you make $35,000 a year or $300,000 a year, if you're doing what you want to do. Because when I first started this job, they started me at $15 an hour. like quite a bit more than that now, but the point was is that I was willing to work $15 an hour doing something I love to prove I could do it. So they had to bring me on, make sure I had the mettle to get the job done. And I'm still there after 3 years, and it's the best job I've ever had. And you can ask my wife, I'm happy to go to work every morning. And I come home with good stories about how I save the world every day. And there's job satisfaction is directly connected to what we think the output is. And so I really hope everybody has an opportunity. But I do believe we need to pay attention to both sides of our personalities. I don't think there's anybody in here that isn't a little bit collective, and at least a little bit individualistic. You know, we're all aspects of that in our minds. But I want to know if you have any questions, and then I'm going to ask the questions for you guys. No?
I have questions, go ahead.
Okay. So have you ever heard of the IKEA effect?
Yeah.
You know what that is? Yeah. The IKEA effect is really interesting. So this started as a test lab. I heard this on TED Radio Hour. They took a test lab where they taught people to make this really ugly origami object. And they had to spend 45 minutes learning how to do this with the full instruction set. They gave them a full instruction about how to fold this ugly thing. And they folded it, and they loved it. And then they asked people if they would buy it. And not very many people were interested in buying it that weren't part of the group. But when they asked what you would pay for it, people say $5, $10, right? Well, this is interesting. And they did another lab where they took the same object, but they gave less instruction sets. You kind of had to figure out a whole lot of it. And it would take them hours, you know, to figure out how to fold this ugly thing. They would fold this ugly thing up and just love it. But the interesting part about this is when they asked how much they would pay for it, it was like $15, $20. It was uglier than before, right? Built it wrong. And this is the same, so they relate this to the IKEA effect. When you go buy a piece of furniture from IKEA, not knocking anybody who does, well, it takes you an hour to get through the instruction set, and maybe you don't quite build it right, then you fix it, and just feel fantastic about that piece of furniture. And you paid $150, say, for it. Would you pay $165 for it if it was sitting on the showroom floor somewhere? No. No. But would you pay $300 for the one you built? Yes. Okay, that's the IKEA effect. So we like to have the feeling that what we put into what we do is always hugely important to the job satisfaction. So, and the value of something. The value of something you get your hands in. My Raspberry Pi, for example, built the whole thing. It's awesome. You know, it's a terrible computer.